You're not alone tonight.
Somewhere out there in the vast emptiness above, something is watching. You might not see it, you might not hear it, but stories have a way of surfacing. Stories from people just like you. So get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let me take you into the dark world of true alien encounters. This is True, Scary, Alien and UFO Encounter Horror Stories for Sleep. It was supposed to be just another long overnight haul. Rick Mendez, a 42-year-old truck driver with 18 years of experience, was driving his regular route through Arizona, just past Flagstaff, and heading toward a truck stop in Hallbrook. He remembers checking the time, 1:17 a.m. The road was empty except for him, and the sky was unnaturally clear, the moon hanging full and bright. But Rick never made it to Hallbrook. The next thing he remembers, he was parked, engine running, headlights still on, and his dashboard clock blinking. 4:26 a.m. He had no memory of driving those last 70 miles. His last log showed he hadn't made a single stop. But his GPS showed an erratic zigzag pattern, off-road, cutting through desert terrain he never would have risked on purpose. He tried to call dispatch. No signal. When the sun began to rise, Rick got out and noticed something else. A strange metallic residue across the hood of his truck. It shimmered in the morning light, like oil but more solid, almost crystallized. He checked himself in the mirror. That's when he noticed it. A small triangular mark behind his left ear. Almost like a brand. It hadn't been there before. Rick eventually made it to a local diner where he frantically explained what happened. The waitress paused, looked at him, and said, "You're not the first one who's come in like that. We hear this more often than you think." That mark never faded, and the dreams Rick had after that night, dark rooms, blinding lights, figures with no faces, always watching. Rick stopped driving night shifts after that, and he never returned to Arizona.
The Backyard Visitor. 16-year-old Mariah lived in a quiet New Mexico suburb with her mother. Her room faced the backyard, where a single oak tree grew by the fence line. It was a school night, 2:12 a.m. Mariah was awake, scrolling on her phone beneath the covers, when she heard a faint tapping on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. She froze. Her blinds were closed, but the sound was deliberate, not like a branch. It sounded like fingers. She peeked through the blinds. There, standing in the yard, was something tall. Thin, too thin. It had an elongated head and limbs that hung unnaturally. It wasn't moving, just staring. She ran to her mom's room, woke her up, and when they came back together, it was gone. But in the morning, the grass where it stood was dead. And not just dead, singed. A perfect 6-foot circle of charred lawn. Over the next few nights, the tapping returned. Each time, a little louder, a little closer. The police brushed it off. The neighbors joked about kids playing alien. But on the 7th night, Mariah woke up with a nosebleed. Her phone was fried, wouldn't turn on, and carved into her bedroom wall were 3 symbols, ones she had never seen before: spirals, triangles, circles within circles. She doesn't live in that house anymore, but she still draws those symbols in her notebooks without realizing it. The campground disappearance. In the dense, pine-choked woods of southern Oregon, 3 friends set out for a weekend camping trip. Logan, Jesse, and Ryan had been best friends since middle school. They chose a secluded clearing they'd visited once before, miles from the nearest road. The first night was uneventful. The second night changed everything. Around 2:40 a.m., Logan woke up needing to pee. He unzipped the tent, stepped outside, and saw lights, hovering, silent, about 30 feet above the trees, a soft blue glow, shifting, pulsing like it was alive. He called out to Jesse and Ryan. Jesse came out, Ryan didn't. They unzipped the tent. Ryan was gone, his sleeping bag still zipped, no signs of struggle, no footprints. Panic set in. They searched the forest with flashlights. For hours, nothing. They hiked back to their car at sunrise and called authorities. 2 days later, Ryan's clothes were found, folded neatly on a mossy log 10 miles from camp. Shoes placed side by side. Shirt and jeans clean, not a speck of dirt. No tracks leading to or from the area. No sign of Ryan, ever. Logan and Jesse don't speak much these days, but sometimes they both still wake up at 2:40 a.m. and swear they see that blue light again, hovering, waiting. The man from the other side of the road. I was 17, driving home late through the back roads of southern Indiana. Roads I knew like muscle memory. The stars were out that night, too many to count, and the forest on either side of me was just blackness. No lights, no cars, just my engine humming and the crunch of my tires on the gravel shoulder when I drifted too far. I remember it clearly. I was approaching a stretch where there's nothing, no homes, no power lines, no mailboxes, just woods. That's when I saw a man standing on the side of the road. He wasn't hitchhiking, he wasn't waving, he just stood there, still, tall, pale skin, slicked back hair, and eyes so dark they looked hollow. I slowed the car out of instinct, even though everything in me said don't stop. But before I could decide, he was already crossing the road, slowly, directly in front of my car, without ever looking at me. As soon as he hit the other side, I blinked, and he was gone. Gone like he was never there. I slammed the brakes and got out. The road was dead silent. No footsteps, no rustling in the trees, not even the chirp of a cricket. I looked to the right, where he would have walked into the forest, and that's when I saw it, a bright blue orb, pulsating behind the tree line, floating. It hovered a few feet off the ground, then started to rise, slowly, silently. I swear to God it moved like it was watching me. Then it just shot upward, straight up into the sky and vanished. No sound, no wind, nothing. That night I didn't sleep. And for weeks I'd dream about the man, his face, his movements, how he just stared through me. And the worst part? 2 days later, I drove past that spot again in the daytime. There was a wooden cross in the ground with a name I didn't recognize. Someone had died there, apparently, but no one in town could tell me who. Deep woods, no cell signal. We had a tent, a fire pit, and a little Zoom audio recorder we'd brought to capture wildlife sounds at night. Owls, coyotes, that kind of thing. We weren't ghost hunters or alien freaks, just nerds trying to get sound effects for a short film. The first night was normal, quiet, peaceful even. But on the second night, something changed. It was just after 3 a.m. when I woke up to what I thought was a loud pop, like a branch snapping right outside the tent. I sat up and looked around. My cousins were dead asleep. I didn't hear it again, so I laid back down. The next morning, we played back the recording to check if anything got picked up. What we heard wasn't normal. It started with static, then faint metallic humming, then the clearest, most chilling part of all, a voice. It wasn't English. It didn't sound human. Garbled but deliberate, like a corrupted transmission. My cousin rewound it like 5 times, frozen in place. He looked pale. There was one clear word in the mess of static. It sounded like, observe. We laughed it off at first, told ourselves it was some audio glitch, but later that night, the same cousin woke me up in a panic. There were lights, white and green, flashing in the trees. We rushed out with our flashlights and saw nothing, but our firewood was moved, and the audio recorder, gone. We packed up the next morning and left early. We don't talk about it much anymore, but I still have a copy of that audio, and every once in a while I listen to it, just to remind myself I wasn't imagining it.
Marcus lived alone on a 40-acre plot in rural Kansas. He was up early every morning, feeding livestock, checking fences. He didn't believe in aliens or spirits, just weather and work. Until the morning, he lost 2 hours. It was late October, cold but dry. Marcus walked out at 5:11 a.m. to check on the horses. Everything was fine. The sun hadn't yet risen. He got to the barn, opened the gate, and then the sky flashed white, like lightning, except there was no storm, no thunder. When his eyes adjusted, everything was frozen. The wind had stopped. His breath wasn't fogging in the air anymore. The horses weren't moving. He looked down at his watch. 5:11 a.m. Still. He blinked, looked again. 5:11 a.m. Then a sound, low and vibrating, like metal grinding underwater. He turned, and hovering above the field was a shape, not saucer-like, not a drone. It looked like a massive spinning spiral carved from liquid metal. It pulsed once, and Marcus blacked out. He woke up lying in the same field. The horses were gone, the barn door was still open, and his watch read 7:27 a.m. He tried to report it. No one believed him. But 3 days later, a rancher 40 miles north called in a report, 6 horses wandering on his land, every one of them with a strange triangle burned into the fur behind the left ear.
Every summer, families camp out at Lake Miriam in Montana. A quiet place, no cell service, no traffic, just stars and water. But there's one spot near the lake that nobody camps anymore. Locals call it the Hollow. In July of 2021, a couple named Andrew and Nina not from the area, set up camp there. They weren't told anything. The first night they saw lights, bright floating blue orbs drifting over the lake, then vanishing. They thought it was cool, filmed it on Nina's phone. The second night they were sitting by the fire when the lights returned, but this time they moved fast, too fast, zipping overhead in sharp, perfect 90-degree turns. The fire went out by itself. The woods went completely silent. And then the water started to ripple, like something massive was just beneath the surface. Andrew stood to grab the flashlight, and that's when a beam of white light came down on the tent. Nina screamed, the beam vanished. When they got to the tent, it was gone, not collapsed, gone. The stake still in the ground, the outline still pressed in the dirt, but nothing there. They packed what they could and left before sunrise. Nina uploaded the video she had taken, but within hours it was flagged and removed from every platform for graphic content. She still has it on a hard drive, but she won't show anyone because there's something at the very end, a frame, less than a second, of a face, not human, staring directly into the lens. Caleb was 12 when it happened. He was riding in the back seat while his dad drove them home from his aunt's in the countryside. It was a long drive, quiet, just fields and stars. That's when Caleb saw it, something above their car. He rolled down the window, stuck his head out. Above them, perfectly centered, was a black triangle, silent, unmoving. He told his dad. His dad didn't believe him. But when they pulled into the driveway, the triangle was still there, hovering. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It just followed. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He stared at his ceiling. And just past midnight, he saw lights pass over the window. He went to look. But there was nothing. No sound. Just a buzzing in his head, like a hum in his brain. He woke up with a bloody nose, his clothes soaked in sweat, and on the wall, next to his bed, a triangle drawn in charcoal, but Caleb didn't own any charcoal, and the door was locked from the inside. It was past midnight in a quiet California neighborhood when James, a retired bus driver, stepped outside for some air. The street lamps glowed orange, the same as always. But something felt off. There was no wind, no insects, not even the distant hum of traffic. Then he noticed it. The car across the street was frozen mid-turn. A slow right turn, completely still. The headlights hung frozen in fog. A squirrel perched on a fence didn't blink, didn't move. James rubbed his eyes, thinking he was losing it. Then came the buzzing from above. He looked up, and there, hovering directly over his house, was a wide, circular object. No markings, no lights, just matte black, blending into the night sky. He blacked out. When he woke up, he was lying on his front lawn. It was 4:12 a.m. The street was normal. The squirrel was gone. The car was parked. But he had something clutched in his hand. A handful of white sand. There's no beach for 60 miles. Samantha lived in a rural Virginia farmhouse, alone except for her dog Baxter. Every night at 3:33 a.m. for 7 days, someone or something knocked twice on her front door. Always the same rhythm. Always the same time. When she opened the door, no one. By the fifth night, she set up a motion sensor camera.
On the seventh night, the knocks came louder. Bang, bang. She ran to the screen expecting to see a prankster, but what played on her camera chilled her. There was no figure, just a shadow, like a smudge across the lens growing darker as it approached the camera. Then, total black. Then the footage resumed, normal. Porch light flickering. But now, the knocks were coming from inside the house. She fled and never returned.
Samantha lived in a rural Virginia farmhouse, alone except for her dog Baxter. Every night at 3:33 a.m. for 7 days, someone or something knocked twice on her front door. Always the same rhythm, always the same time. When she opened the door, no one. By the fifth night, she set up a motion sensor camera. On the seventh night, the knocks came louder. Bang, bang. She ran to the screen expecting to see a prankster, but what played on her camera chilled her. There was no figure, just a shadow, like a smudge across the lens growing darker as it approached the camera. Then, total black. Then the footage resumed, normal. Porch light flickering. But now, the knocks were coming from inside the house. She fled and never returned.
Rideshare driver Alex was used to picking up strange fares, but this one he couldn't explain. A young woman flagged him down on a dirt road just outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. No phone, no address, just said she needed to go toward the moon. He laughed, asked her again. She just stared, wide-eyed, and repeated it, toward the moon. He began driving east and she stayed silent, staring upward. At a red light, he turned to ask if she was okay, and she was gone. Seatbelt still buckled, door unopened. He reported it. They found nothing, but that night, his phone played a voicemail from an unknown number. It was static, and then her voice. It's almost time to wake up.
2:08 a.m. A small Colorado town's TVs and radios all lit up with an emergency broadcast alert. But there was no storm, no fire. Just one message repeating, "Do not engage with the reflection. Stay away from mirrors. You are not alone." Then it stopped. A dozen residents reported hearing footsteps in their homes. A few said they saw someone in their mirror who moved slightly out of sync. The power went out for exactly 11 minutes. When it came back, all their clocks read 2:08 a.m. again. That message was never logged by any official channel. A forest ranger in West Virginia came across a boy sitting on a rock, midday, in the heat, shoeless, silent, pale. When the ranger asked where his parents were, the boy pointed straight up, dead serious. "They're watching us," he whispered. Before the ranger could ask more, the boy stood and walked behind a tree and never came out the other side. The search team combed the woods for 2 days. Nothing. On the third morning, they found footprints in the mud at the top of the tallest hill, child-sized, pointing straight upward into the sky. Leon, a 31-year-old amateur radio enthusiast from Idaho, likes scanning the shortwave frequencies late at night. It helped him relax. a weird kind of white noise therapy. Static, beeps, the occasional garbled voice from across the country. Harmless. But one night, something answered back. He was scanning around 1:41 a.m. when his receiver caught an extremely faint pulse. Low, rhythmic, not like Morse code, not any pattern he recognized. It repeated once every 17 seconds. Then suddenly, it stopped. Silence. Leon leaned forward. Then he heard it. A voice, mechanical, garbled, yet clear enough. Leon. He froze. It wasn't a coincidence. It said his name. He rewound the tape, played it again. Same thing. Leon. But when he tried to record it a second time, the entire device shut off. No lights, no signal. The next night it happened again. Same frequency, same time. This time the voice said something else. He couldn't make it out, but he recognized his name again. Whispered, like it was being pulled through a tunnel. Then came the dreams. Leon dreamed of a tall figure standing in a field of satellite dishes, all pointed straight up. The figure wasn't moving, but the signal was coming from it, buzzing, pulsing, trying to push into his mind. He tried to stop listening. He unplugged the radios, disassembled everything, even burned the tapes, but the signal still came. Through his TV, his phone, even when devices were off. On the last night before he moved, his doorbell rang at 1:41 a.m. There was no one there. Just a package. Inside, a shortwave radio, already turned on. It was receiving a signal. Leon.
Daryl lived in a small wooded town in West Virginia, one of those places with more trees than people. His property backed up against dense forest, the kind that turns pitch black by 8 p.m. He had an old shed out back, about 30 feet from the main house. It hadn't been used in years, just a place where rust collected on old tools. No one went near it, until the banging started. Every night at exactly 3:03 a.m., something slammed into the shed walls. Once, then silence. Daryl thought it was a raccoon, or maybe a bear. He set up a trail cam. Nothing. Then one night, it banged twice, and the lights in his house flickered. He grabbed his flashlight and a baseball bat, walked out barefoot in the cold, just his boxers and adrenaline keeping him moving. The shed door was cracked open. He swung it wide and stepped in. Nothing. Just old paint cans, some shelves, and a thick smell, like scorched copper. He turned to leave, but something brushed past his leg. He looked down. A small black box sat where there hadn't been anything before. It looked like a radio, but older. Wires coming out the back, none of them plugged into anything. It started humming, then speaking. Low at first, mechanical. You see now, don't you? Daryl stumbled back, dropped the flashlight. When it hit the ground, it flickered. And in the strobe light burst, he saw it. A figure, tall, hunched, with limbs like cables, standing in the back corner. Then it was gone. He ran, locked every door, sat in the living room until sunrise. When he returned the next day with police, the shed was empty. But the box remained. They took it, sent it for testing. A week later, the officer who submitted the report went missing. All Daryl got back was a sticky note left in his mailbox. It read, "Don't listen after 3." Jenna was driving home from her overnight shift at the hospital. It was just past 2 a.m., and the stretch of road between the hospital and her apartment was empty. Long, straight, and unlit. She was halfway home when she saw it. A figure standing on the shoulder, right where the woods met the road. Not hitchhiking, not moving, just standing with its head slightly tilted. Jenna slowed instinctively, not enough to stop, but enough to see. Its eyes reflected red in her headlights, not like animal eyes. They were too even, too human. As she passed, her car filled with a low, buzzing sound, not from outside, but through the radio, the dash, even her phone. Then, from her passenger side window, she saw something impossible. The figure was still there, pacing her car, perfectly in line with the passenger window. Jenna slammed the brakes, looked again. Nothing. Shaking, she floored it the rest of the way home. She parked, ran upstairs, and didn't sleep. In the morning, she told herself it was stress, exhaustion, hallucination maybe, until she checked her passenger window. There, clear as day, was a handprint. Long fingers, too long, 4 joints instead of 3. She didn't touch it, just stared. The next night, she drove with all her windows up and a friend on speaker. Nothing happened. But 2 days later, the handprint returned, only this time, it was on the inside. Gabe was a night photographer. Lived in northern Utah, surrounded by canyons, valleys, and skies so clear you could see every constellation. On April 19th, 2022, he headed out around midnight to a usual spot, an elevated ridge overlooking a ghost town, abandoned since the 60s. He'd been there dozens of times. It was quiet, open, perfect for time-lapse shots of the sky. He set up his tripod, adjusted the exposure, and started a long capture. But 15 minutes into the shoot, every star in the sky blinked out. Not like a cloud passing, not dimming, just gone. The entire sky went pitch black. No moon, no stars, no satellites, just the outline of the mountains barely visible. Then, silence. Even the crickets stopped. Gabe reached for his phone. No signal. The time was frozen at 12:47 a.m. Then he heard breathing. Not his. It was behind him. Slow, raspy, wet. He turned around, heart pounding, but nothing was there. Then his camera shutter clicked. Not from the time lapse, just once. He looked at the screen. The preview loaded. A photo of himself, taken from behind. In the frame, just over his left shoulder, was a shape. Dark, tall, humanoid. No eyes, no face, just a presence. He turned and ran, left the camera, didn't look back. He returned in the morning with 2 friends. The camera was gone, but the tripod remained twisted and charred, like it had been struck by lightning. They found a second phone nearby, not his. It was cracked, dead, and unregistered. Inside the photo gallery were dozens of images, all of Gabe, sleeping, driving, walking, from angles no one should have been able to get. The final image, him on the ridge, staring directly at the lens. Except, he doesn't remember ever looking that way. Miles inherited his grandfather's house in rural Maine after the man passed in 2014. It was old, radio dials built into the walls, a shortwave tower still standing out back. His grandfather had been a ham radio enthusiast, claiming he'd picked up signals from all over the world. But before he died, he told Miles something strange. If you ever hear them talking through the static, don't answer back. Miles thought it was just rambling, but out of curiosity, he started messing with the equipment. Most of it was dead, but one night, after a power outage, the radio in the attic lit up. By itself. Static hissed through the speaker for a few minutes, then cut out. Then a voice. Faint. Garbled. Miles. He froze. No one else was in the house. No one even knew he'd turned the radio on. You're not alone up there. He yanked the cord. Next night, it came on again. This time, the signal was clearer, just static, then short pulses of Morse code. He recorded it, ran it through a translator. The message read, "We remember you." He stopped using the radio, locked the attic, but it kept turning on. One morning, he found the attic door open, footsteps in the dust, not his. The last time it turned on, the voice was louder, closer. "We knew your grandfather. He let us in. Now it's your turn." Miles doesn't live there anymore, but he says sometimes, when he's driving through the woods at night with the windows down, he hears static. Not from the radio, from inside the car. In 2019, a group of 5 friends took a road trip to Crater Lake, Oregon. They've been planning it all year, camping, hiking, and unplugging from the world. On their second day, they stopped by a scenic overlook and asked a man nearby to take a group photo of them. He looked about 50, wearing a beige windbreaker, polite but quiet. He took the photo, handed the phone back, and walked off into the woods. That night, around the campfire, they looked at the picture. Something was off. In the photo, there were 6 people. Their 5 friends and someone else standing behind them, wearing a beige windbreaker, but his face was blurred, like the camera couldn't focus on it. Just a smear of skin tone, no eyes, no mouth. They brushed it off. Glitch, motion blur. The next day, they asked a park ranger if anyone had reported seeing strange people in the area. The ranger went pale. He showed them a photo from 1996, a group of hikers who had gone missing at that same overlook. There, in the background of their photo, was the same man, same jacket, same spot, same blurred face. Over the next 2 nights, things escalated. One friend woke up outside his tent, barefoot, shivering, feet completely clean.
Another heard whispers mimicking his own voice from just beyond the tree line, and their car battery died despite being brand new. On the last day, they decided to cut the trip short, but before leaving, they checked the photos on the phone again. The picture had changed. The man in the windbreaker was now closer, standing directly behind one of them. Still no face. That friend, Trevor, hasn't been the same since. He doesn't talk about the trip, but he deletes every group photo he's in, just in case someone shows up after. Eric and Alana lived on the outskirts of Sedona, Arizona, a place known for its energy vortexes and frequent UFO sightings. They weren't into that kind of stuff, just like the peace and quiet. One night in April, around 11:30 p.m., they were sitting on their back porch when they noticed something in the sky. A single light, hovering low, silent. At first, they thought it was a drone, maybe someone playing around. But it wasn't moving, not even a wobble, just floating. Eric went to get his binoculars. When he looked, he realized it wasn't a drone. It had no rotors, no blinking lights, just a matte black object shaped like a teardrop, slowly rotating in place. Then it began to rise, smooth, effortless, until it was just a pinpoint in the sky, and then gone. The next day, Eric checked the footage from their outdoor security camera. It had captured the light, but just as it started to rise, the feed glitched. The time code jumped from 11:33 to 11:42, 9 minutes, missing. He shrugged it off until later that week when Alana started sleepwalking. She had never done that before. She'd wake up in the hallway or by the front door, eyes open but unaware. One night, Eric woke up and found her standing in the backyard, barefoot, staring up. When he called her name, she didn't respond. He touched her shoulder, and she whispered, "They're still here." He asked who. She just turned around, walked back inside, and went back to bed. The next morning, she didn't remember anything. 2 weeks later, Eric noticed something else. Behind their shed, in a patch of dry dirt, was a perfect circle, burned into the ground, 5 feet wide. Nothing grew there afterward, even now, 5 years later. They moved after that, left Sedona, told friends it was just to be closer to the city. But Eric keeps that security footage on a private drive. And sometimes, late at night, he plays it back and swears just before the glitch, you can see a figure standing in the shadows behind the fence, watching. It happened on a quiet Tuesday in a small town outside Helena, Montana. At exactly 3:12 a.m., every phone in the neighborhood lit up, not with a call, not a message, but with a screen of solid white. No sound,
No vibration, just a white screen glowing silently in the dark. People across the block reported the same thing. Phones they hadn't touched in hours suddenly lighting up. Alarms that were never set going off. Smart TVs powering on with pure static. Then came the humming. Low, mechanical, like a power station deep underground. Some reported feeling pressure in their skulls, like altitude sickness. Pets were panicking. Dogs howled, cats hissed at walls. And then the sky changed. A few residents stepped outside. The stars were gone. Not cloud cover, not fog, just blackness. One man, Caleb Jensen, said it was like the entire sky was a screen that had shut off. No depth, he said, just a void, like staring into something that was staring back. The next morning, everyone was exhausted, but what scared them most wasn't what happened, it was what didn't. Local authorities received 0 911 calls that night, not because nothing happened, but because nobody could get through. The emergency lines were dead. When phone carriers were questioned, they claimed there had been no outages. Everything on their end had functioned perfectly. Caleb's neighbor checked his security footage. It cut off at 3:12 and resumed at 3:23. In that gap, just one frame had survived, a still image. It showed a figure, tall, thin, pale, standing in Caleb's yard. Its arms were too long. Its head was tilted, watching the camera directly. The file corrupted minutes later. Only the thumbnail remains. People still live in that neighborhood, but no one talks about that night. And every year, on the anniversary, at exactly 3:12 a.m., everyone turns their phones off. Just in case. Graham Porter was a third-generation farmer in central Iowa. Big sky country. Flat land, cold winters, and more stars than you'd ever see in the city. In early September of 2019, he started noticing strange activity near the west field, specifically around the abandoned grain silo they hadn't used in years. One night, he was walking the perimeter with his dog, Buck. It was just after 11 p.m. when Buck froze. Ears up, tail stiff, growling at the silo. Graham looked up. There were lights, not headlights, not flashlights. They floated, 5 or 6 of them, each glowing a soft bluish white, like lanterns underwater. They hovered low to the ground, in a perfect line around the base of the silo. Silent, not moving. Graham called out. Nothing. He took a few steps closer, and the lights blinked out, all at once. Buck yelped and bolted. Graham stood there in the dark, heart pounding, silence stretching. Then he heard it. Metal, groaning, from inside the silo. He left, fast. The next day, he checked the silo. The metal hatch was twisted open. From the inside, like something had pushed it out. No signs of entry, no tracks. Just a strange, fine gray dust in a perfect ring around the base. It wasn't ash. It wasn't dirt. He sent it to the county lab. They couldn't identify it. That week, his crops near the silo started dying. Not all of them, just a perfect 30-foot circle. Graham didn't talk about it until months later, when another farmer, 12 miles away, reported the exact same thing. Same lights, same gray dust, Same dead circle. Except in his case, he found something else. A piece of what looked like metal, thin, smooth, blacker than anything he'd ever seen. Cold to the touch. He sent it to a university lab. It went missing in transit. The report was lost. Now, every September, Graham says he still sees those lights. They never come closer. They just watch the silo, waiting.
In 2006, Valerie Lambert inherited her grandfather's home in upstate New York after he passed away unexpectedly. It was a modest, two-story house on the edge of a sleepy rural town, surrounded by forest. She took some time off work to clean it up and settle the estate. The house was old, but everything worked, except the television. An old box TV sat in the living room, connected to a battered rooftop antenna. Valerie wasn't planning to use it, but one night, out of boredom and with no cell signal or Wi-Fi, she decided to see if it still picked anything up. She flipped it on. Every channel was static, white noise and flickering fuzz. Until channel 98. That one had something. It wasn't a show, just a still shot of a road, dirt, surrounded by pine trees. Camera low to the ground, like it was propped on something. The footage was grainy but steady. Nothing moved, no sound. Just that static buzz underneath it all. She stared for a few minutes, confused. Then the screen glitched and the camera angle changed. Now it was closer to the ground. Same road, same trees, just a few feet farther ahead. She turned it off. But the next night, when she turned it on again, curious, it was on channel 98 again. Same road. But now, something was different. There was a figure, far in the distance, barely visible, human-like, standing still. She watched for half an hour. It didn't move, just stood there. She unplugged the TV. The following night, she heard a sound in the living room. A faint hum, like an old tube TV warming up. The screen was on. Channel 98. The figure was closer now, still not moving. Still watching. She stayed in a motel that night. When she returned the next day, the TV was unplugged. The power cord had been snapped in half. She threw the entire unit out, brought in her own flat screen. But a week later, she found a note on her kitchen table. No handwriting. Just a printed sentence in faded ink. We will continue to transmit. Valerie moved out before the month ended. She sold the house to a local man who wanted to renovate it. He gutted the living room, tore out the carpet, took down the antenna. Elliot King was an electrician working solo in the outskirts of Lincoln, Nebraska. He'd been called out to an old farmhouse. New owners were renovating it after it sat abandoned for nearly 12 years. It was a basic job. Check the fuse box, test some wires. Nothing unusual. Until he went into the crawl space. It was tight, barely 3 feet high, littered with old insulation and rusted tools. But it was dry, and nothing seemed dangerous. Until he heard the hum. Low, rhythmic, mechanical. Not from the wiring. It was coming from the ground. He tapped the floorboards above, normal, but the dirt below him, it vibrated, like something beneath the foundation was working. He followed the vibration until he reached the far corner of the crawl space. That's when he saw it, a metal hatch, bolted into the earth itself, not part of the house, no hinge, no handle, just a solid circular plate of steel embedded in the dirt. And on top of it, scratch marks, deep, like someone or something had tried to pry it open from below. Elliot got out fast. He didn't finish the job. He called the owners, said the wiring needed a full replacement, and left. But something bothered him. That hum. So a week later, he returned. The house was empty. No cars, no lights, but the front door was unlocked. Inside, the place looked abandoned again, like no one had been there in weeks. He called out, no answer. Then he heard it. From under the floorboards, a voice, not muffled, not distant, just one word, knock. He turned and ran. When the police investigated later, the house was condemned. No one could explain where the owners went, but that hatch, still there, still sealed, and the hum, still going.
If you've made it this far, you already know something most people don't, that the skies above us, and sometimes the ground below, hold things we're not meant to understand. These aren't stories you find on the news. These are the ones whispered about, hidden, passed down, silenced. But here, they're told. If you want more stories like these, subscribe to Para UAP. We'll keep the light on, just in case they come back. Sleep well, if you still can.